You did not see it coming, not the full weight of it anyway. You knew things were hard. You knew you were running on less than you should have been running on. You knew somewhere in the back of your mind that something was not right, but you kept going anyway. Because that is what you do. Because stopping felt like failing. Because there were people counting on you and things that needed to be handled and a life that required your continued functioning whether you felt capable of functioning or not. And then one day, the functioning stopped. Not gradually. Not in a way that gave you time to prepare or brace yourself or figure out a plan. It just stopped. And you found yourself in a place that is genuinely difficult to describe to anyone who has not been there. Not sad exactly, not angry, something quieter and heavier and more disorienting than either of those. Like the engine that was running, everything went offline. Like the version of you that knew how to handle things simply disappeared and left you standing in the middle of your own life, wondering how you got here and what you are supposed to do now. That is what emotional collapse actually feels like from the inside. Not the dramatic breakdown that movies show. The quiet collapse, the one that happens behind closed doors, the one that leaves you functional enough to get through the day but hollow in a way that sleep does not fix and distraction does not touch. And the hardest part is not the collapse itself, it is the aftermath. The trying to figure out how to rebuild something when you are not even entirely sure what fell apart or why or what the rebuilt version is supposed to look like. Nobody teaches you this part. Nobody sits you down and says, here is what happened to you, and here is why it makes complete sense, and here is the honest, realistic process of putting yourself back together in a way that is more solid than what was there before. You are just supposed to figure it out while simultaneously trying to keep your life from completely unraveling around you. This conversation is the thing nobody sat you down and said. 7 honest things about what the rebuilding actually requires. Not a quick fix. Not a 10-step program that promises you will be back to normal in 30 days. 7 genuine human truths about what this process actually asks of you if you want what comes out the other side to be genuinely better rather than just a reassembled version of what collapsed. Before we begin, type this in the comments and mean it. I rebuild better. 1. Stop pretending you are fine. The healing cannot begin until you acknowledge what actually happened. There is this thing people do after something breaks them. They perform okay. They pull together just enough of the functioning version of themselves to present to the world, and they hold that presentation together through sheer exhausted will, while everything underneath it is still completely in pieces. And they do this not because they are dishonest people. They do it because collapse feels like the kind of thing that should be hidden. Like if the wrong person sees how broken things actually are, they will use that information against you. Or worse, they will see you differently from that point forward. The capable person who always had it together suddenly revealed as someone who could not hold it together when it mattered. And so, the performance continues. The tired smile. The yeah, I am okay just going through some stuff. The careful management of how much anyone sees while underneath the surface, everything is still completely unresolved. But here is the honest problem with that approach. You cannot heal from something you are actively pretending is not as bad as it is. You cannot rebuild from a position of denial because the denial takes energy, real energy that your system does not currently have to spare. And all of that energy being directed toward maintaining the performance is energy that is not going toward the actual recovery. It is like trying to heal a serious injury while simultaneously hiding it from the only person who could actually treat it, which is you. The injury does not improve because you are skilled at concealing it. It just continues not being treated while you spend your limited resources on the concealment. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that belongs directly here. He said, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. And the thing that is not true, the thing you have been saying with your body language and your tired smile and your everything is fine, is costing you more than the discomfort of simply saying the true thing would ever cost. The true thing is this. Something happened that was real and significant. Something in me broke under the weight of what I was carrying. I am not okay right now, and that is not a character flaw. It is an honest assessment of a real situation that deserves genuine care rather than continued management and careful concealment from the people around me and from myself. You do not have to say that to everyone. You are not obligated to make your pain public. But you have to say it to yourself. The honest internal acknowledgement that this is real and significant and deserves genuine attention rather than the performance of coping is where everything else begins. Not from the performance, from the honesty. Because healing cannot find you where you are pretending to be. It can only find you where you actually are. If you are ready to stop pretending and start healing, type this below. I feel, I heal. 2. Rest is not laziness. Your system is recovering from something real. After something like this happens, the guilt about not doing more arrives almost immediately. You are lying there unable to function at anything close to your normal level, and somewhere in the background a voice is already telling you that you should be doing something, that resting is indulgent, that other people have it worse and they are managing, that every day you spend recovering is a day you are falling behind on something important. And that voice is wrong. Not slightly wrong, completely wrong. Because what happened to you was not a bad week that some effort and a good attitude can quickly reverse. It was a genuine physiological and psychological event. Your nervous system was running at crisis level for an extended period of time. Your emotional reserves were completely drained. Your capacity for the ordinary demands of daily life was stretched past its sustainable limit until it gave way. And the system that went through all of that needs real time to recover. Not because you are weak, because that is simply how biological systems work. They cannot perform normally when they are simultaneously trying to recover from something significant. They cannot heal and function at full capacity at the same time. And demanding full capacity from a system that is in recovery mode does not accelerate the recovery. It delays it, or stops it entirely, and forces it to happen later with more to recover from than if the rest had simply been allowed when it was needed. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." And one of the quietest and most costly ways people waste their recovery time is by spending it feeling guilty about needing to recover. Lying there genuinely exhausted, and instead of allowing the body and the mind to do the work that real rest makes possible, spending that time in a running internal argument about whether the rest is deserved and whether a stronger person would be further along by now. That is not rest. That is exhausted guilt. And exhausted guilt produces nothing except more exhaustion and a recovery that takes significantly longer than it needed to. Real rest is not empty time. During genuine rest, the nervous system that was in extended crisis mode begins the process of returning to a regulated state. The mind that was too overwhelmed to process difficult experiences begins processing them. The emotional resources that were completely depleted begin the slow process of being restored. All of that essential work is happening in the rest. None of it is happening in the guilt about the rest. Give yourself permission to recover at the pace that genuine recovery actually requires, not the pace that the guilt demands, not the pace that would be impressive to other people, the pace that the actual biological and psychological work of healing from something real actually takes, without apology and without the performance of productivity to justify the time being spent on something as quietly essential as your own recovery. 3. What broke you does not get to define you. Release the story. In the quiet hours after collapse, a story forms. Almost automatically, the mind trying to make sense of what happened by constructing a narrative around it. And the narrative that forms in the immediate aftermath of something painful is almost always darker and considerably less accurate than the one that becomes visible later from a greater distance. The story says things like this: I should have been stronger. I should have seen this coming, and the fact that I did not means something unflattering about my judgment. The fact that I collapsed means something fundamental about me is broken in a way that is not easily repaired. Other people handle things like this without falling apart, and the fact that I did not means I am less capable and less resilient than I believed myself to be. These stories feel true. They carry the particular convincing weight of something that appears to have been proven by evidence rather than merely assumed. Because the collapse feels like evidence, like the collapse itself is the data that confirms the story, but the story is not the truth. It is the interpretation of the truth, an interpretation constructed by a mind that is in real pain and operating with genuinely incomplete information and constructing meaning from the most limited and most distorted perspective available. The perspective of someone who is in the center of the worst of it. And that perspective, however convincingly it presents itself as objective reality, is not the complete picture. The complete picture includes things the story consistently leaves out. It includes the fact that what you were carrying was genuinely too heavy for any one person, that the support available was genuinely insufficient for what was being required, that the conditions that produced the collapse were not evidence of your personal inadequacy, but evidence of a situation that exceeded what any person could sustain indefinitely. Epictetus said, "Men are disturbed not by the things which happen, but by the opinions about the things." The opinion about the collapse. The story you are telling yourself about what it means and what it reveals and what it says about your future. That story can be examined honestly. It can be questioned with the same intellectual rigor you would bring to any other claim that was presenting itself as established fact. It can be revised in light of more complete evidence than the darkness of the worst moments provides. Not replaced with false positivity that pretends the collapse was not genuinely difficult. Examined with the honesty required to distinguish between what actually happened and what the story is saying happened. Because the story you carry into the rebuilding becomes the foundation of what you build on top of it. And a foundation built from the most distorted interpretation of the most distorted moment is not solid enough to support anything genuinely lasting. Find the more honest story, the one that includes what you were carrying and how long you carried it and what the conditions actually were, rather than only what the collapse says about you as a person. That story is more accurate, and it is a better foundation to build from. If you are ready to release the story and find a more honest one, claim this below. I release what broke me. 4. Your limits were not the problem. Ignoring them was. When people look honestly at the period before emotional collapse, they almost always find the same essential pattern, even if the specific circumstances look different. They were giving more than they were receiving for longer than was sustainable. They were saying yes to things that were genuinely beyond their actual capacity. They were making themselves available in ways that did not leave enough reserve for themselves. They were treating their own needs as the last consideration on a list that everything and everyone else had priority over. And they were doing this not because they were being deliberately exploited, though sometimes that was also a factor, but because somewhere in their history they absorbed a belief that shaped everything that followed. The belief that having genuine needs of your own is a problem, that the good person gives without limit, that placing your own needs anywhere near the top of the priority list is a form of selfishness that a genuinely caring person does not practice. And that belief, quietly held and consistently acted on over months or years, depletes the person holding it. Because there is no version of giving without limit that does not eventually encounter the limit. The person who keeps giving past the point of genuine sustainability will eventually have nothing left to give. Not because they stopped caring, because the resource they were drawing from was finite and they were drawing from it without ever allowing it to be replenished. And the collapse is often the moment when that depletion becomes impossible to continue ignoring. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The first rule is to keep an untroubled spirit." And keeping an untroubled spirit requires something that most people who end up in collapse have never been adequately taught. It requires the honest and compassionate acknowledgement of what you can genuinely sustain and what you cannot. The willingness to say, this is what I can offer and this is what I cannot, without treating the second part as an admission of failure. That is not selfishness. That is the condition of sustainable generosity. The person who knows their actual limits and communicates them honestly can give consistently and genuinely over the long term. The person who ignores their limits gives everything until there is nothing remaining and then collapses and gives nothing for a considerable period while they slowly recover. The rebuilding requires honest limits, not walls built from bitterness or fear. Clear and compassionate acknowledgement of what you can genuinely offer without depleting yourself past the point of recovery. That is the structure that makes the rebuilt life something that can actually last, rather than something that is simply the previous unsustainable situation reassembled. If you are ready to build honest limits that protect everything you are rebuilding, write this below. I set my limits. 5. Not everyone belongs in the rebuilt version of your life. Choose carefully. Emotional collapse clarifies relationships in ways that very little else manages to. Not because it is designed to perform that function, because the particular circumstances it creates. The temporary unavailability of the version of you that was most functional and most useful and most capable of maintaining the social performance that many relationships quietly require reveals something genuinely honest about the relationships themselves. Some people show up. They check in without waiting to be asked. They make space for the reality of what is happening without requiring you to manage their discomfort about your difficulty before you can access their support. They offer genuine presence in the specific form that presence is actually needed, rather than the form that is most comfortable for them to provide. And some people do not show up. They become less available when the fully functioning version of you goes temporarily offline. They seem most invested in your recovery as a process of returning to the version of you that was most convenient and most useful to them specifically. They make your collapse somehow about them in ways that are subtle enough to be deniable but unmistakable once you start honestly noticing them. This information is uncomfortable to sit with, because it requires you to reassess relationships that you may have been giving more credit than they have actually earned. But it is genuinely valuable information, because it is honest information about what those relationships are actually built on and what they actually require of you to sustain them. And not everyone who was present in the life that collapsed belongs in the life that is being rebuilt. Some people were present specifically because of the version of you that had no limits, the version that was always available and always gave and never asked for much in return. The rebuilt version, with its honest limits and its clearer sense of what it can and cannot carry and what it needs and is willing to ask for, is a fundamentally different proposition for those people. And their response to that different proposition tells you something directly relevant to the decision about whether they belong in the rebuilt life. Epictetus said, "Associate with those who will make a better person of you." Not the people who were most consistently present in the life that collapsed. The people who are genuinely invested in the life that is actually being built, who offer real presence without requiring you to earn it through your usefulness to them, who make the rebuilding feel genuinely supported rather than quietly more difficult. Choose who comes with you with the same care that you are bringing to every other aspect of this rebuilding, not from bitterness about who did not show up, from honest clarity about who actually did and what that reveals about where the genuine support in your life actually lives. 6. There is meaning in what happened. Find it and build from it. This is the step that feels most wrong to talk about while the difficulty is still close. Because when you are in the genuine aftermath of emotional collapse, the suggestion that there is meaning in what happened can feel like a minimization of the pain, like being told that what broke you was secretly good for you. And that is not what this is saying. The collapse was not good. It was painful and costly and disruptive, and the cost was real and deserves to be acknowledged as real rather than reframed into something more palatable. But the collapse happened. And here is what is available in the aftermath of something that genuinely happened. Something can be built from it that could not have been built without it, not despite what happened, because of it. Because the collapse, as genuinely devastating as it was from the inside, also cleared things. It produced a clarity about what was and was not working, that the comfortable momentum of the previous life was actively preventing. It forced an honesty about genuine needs that the performance of not needing anything was successfully concealing. It ended things that needed to end for something better to have room to begin. It revealed who showed up and who did not, in ways that months of comfortable living would never have revealed. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." The collapse is not blocking the path to the life you want to build. In ways that are genuinely difficult to see from the middle of it, it is the path. Because the life that is built honestly in the real aftermath of genuine collapse is built on a foundation that comfortable, untested living never produces. It knows what it costs to ignore genuine needs over a sustained period. It knows what it requires to actually sustain itself rather than simply function until it cannot. It knows what it cannot carry and makes the genuine choice not to carry those things again. And that knowledge, bought at a real price through real experience, changes the quality of everything built on top of it. Find what the collapse is genuinely teaching you, not to justify what it cost. To use the teaching as the most solid and most honest foundation available for what you are building next. Because that foundation, informed by genuine experience rather than optimistic assumption, is more durable than anything you built before it. 7. Learn to trust yourself again. The collapse proved you are human, not that you cannot. Of all the damage that emotional collapse tends to produce, the most persistent and the most quietly debilitating is the damage to self-trust. Because the collapse feels from the inside like evidence that something fundamental about your judgment or your resilience or your basic capacity for the life you were trying to live is genuinely broken. Your judgment led you here. Your resilience ran out when it was most needed. Your capacity turned out to be less than what the life you were trying to live actually required. And now you are supposed to make decisions and trust your instincts and navigate your own rebuilding using the very judgment and resilience and capacity that apparently could not prevent this from happening. That is a genuinely disorienting position to be in. And the loss of self-trust that the collapse produces is often more persistently debilitating over time than any of the external circumstances it created. Because circumstances can be practically rebuilt with enough time and enough honest effort. But navigating the rebuilding from a position of genuine distrust in your own judgment is like trying to build something carefully while constantly questioning whether the builder can actually be trusted with the work. The rebuilding slows, or stops entirely, or produces something tentative and uncertain that reflects the uncertainty of the person doing the building rather than the genuine capability that person actually possesses. But here is what is actually true about what the collapse revealed. It did not reveal that you are insufficient for the life you want. It revealed that you are human, that human beings have real limits. That those limits, when consistently exceeded for long enough, will eventually produce a collapse, regardless of how genuinely strong and resilient and capable the person involved actually is. There is no human being alive who can carry unlimited weight indefinitely without eventual consequence. Not the strongest person you know, not the most capable, not the most seemingly together. Every human being has a point beyond which they cannot continue without cost. The collapse was that point for you. Not evidence of a personal failure that sets you apart from more capable people. Evidence of the universal human reality of limitation that you share with every person who has ever been pushed past what one person can sustainably carry. Epictetus said, "It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters, and the reaction that produces the most genuine and most lasting rebuilding is not shame about the collapse, not the ongoing self-interrogation about how you let it get this far. The honest and genuinely compassionate recognition that this happened and makes complete sense, given everything that preceded it, and that surviving it and choosing to rebuild from it rather than remaining in it is itself the clearest available evidence of exactly the resilience that the collapse temporarily made invisible to you. You are still here, in the aftermath of something real, choosing to rebuild honestly rather than simply performing recovery. That is not made by someone whose judgment cannot be trusted. That is made by someone who is learning, perhaps for the first time in a long time, to extend to themselves the same genuine care and the same honest compassion they would extend without hesitation to anyone else going through exactly what they are going through. Start there. Extend that compassion to yourself first, and build from that foundation rather than from the shame of the collapse. Because the foundation of genuine self-compassion is more solid than anything built on the shaky ground of ongoing self-judgment. One genuine step at a time, back toward yourself, back toward the life that is more honest and more sustainable and more genuinely yours than anything that came before. If you are ready to trust yourself again, claim this below. I trust myself again. You did not see it coming, but you are here now in the aftermath, choosing to rebuild. And that choice matters more than you probably realize right now. 7 honest steps. Stop pretending you are fine, because healing cannot begin from a position of managed concealment. Rest without guilt, because genuine recovery requires the time it actually takes, and that time is not wasted. Release the story that formed in the darkest moment, because that story is the most distorted interpretation of what happened available, and it is not a solid foundation to build anything lasting on. Build the honest limits that the rebuilt life requires, because the absence of them was a significant part of what produced the collapse in the first place. Choose carefully who comes with you, because the collapse revealed who was genuinely there, and that information matters to what you build next. Find the meaning in what happened, not to justify the cost, but because what it taught you is the most solid foundation available for what you are building. And learn to trust yourself again, because the collapse proved you are human, and choosing to rebuild honestly from it proves exactly the resilience it temporarily obscured. The person being built in the honest aftermath of this collapse is not the same person who collapsed. They know things now that cost something real to learn, about what they can carry and what they cannot, about who genuinely shows up and who does not, about what they actually need and what they were trying to make work without having what they needed, about what a genuinely sustainable life looks like for them specifically. That knowledge is real, and the life built carefully on top of it is more solid than anything built before it. Take the time it genuinely takes. Do it honestly rather than impressively, and trust that the person emerging from this process is worth every bit of the careful work being put into building them, because they are. If this found you at exactly the right moment, leave the only thing that matters right now. I rise differently.